And so it's been 3 days now
Right.
since this incident. What information have you found out that you can share with us about how this actually happened?
Well, we do know that they had some help from outside this facility. They may have also had help from inside the facility from other inmates. We're gathering up some of those names. We're interviewing folks. We want to find out exactly how extensive this conspiracy was. We're making good headway. We would ask the public if anybody has any information, any names that they might be able to shed some light on it. Please give us a call at 210-335-6000. We want to make sure we have as a complete picture as we can.
And is there any further information about exactly what kind of tools or weapons they might have used to break through that mesh? Because I know that was something that you were kind of wondering about on Friday.
There was some evidence gathered that there was some implements utilized. I wouldn't elaborate beyond that, but I would say we do have evidence that shows there were some tools involved.
And was that tools that were being made with stuff that was already inside? Because, I know that that's possible. You can make something that's sharp even out of toilet paper.
Right.
Or was it contraband that was actually brought in?
Well, it was most likely contraband that was brought in. And although we've got a pretty good idea of how it got in, we'd love some help from the public if anybody's got any light to shed on it.
And is the jail still on lockdown as of today?
No, most of the jail is off of lockdown. There is one specific area that is under lockdown. So that entire unit that was involved, it was a unit, it was one certain unit that was involved. All of those inmates have been moved to another unit. That unit is the one that's under lockdown still. Now our recreation yards are currently still not being utilized fully. We are conducting a full top-to-bottom inspection of all of those recreation areas to make sure that there's nothing out of the ordinary in those areas.
And, one thing I spoke to people who have corrections experience, they were saying that this oftentimes gets overlooked just because of staffing problems and time and all that kind of stuff, but just frisking people when they go in and out of the recreation yard, because that's oftentimes an opportunity that people can bring stuff inside and outside. Is that a policy that's in place here at the Bexar County Jail?
Well, that is something that we're able to do. At the end of the day, I could build a 100-foot wall around this entire facility. And when you've got anywhere from 3,000 to 4,500 inmates at any given time who have nothing but time on their hands and figure out how to defeat that 100-foot wall, at some point, somebody's going to figure it out. It may take a week, it may take a month, it may take a couple of years. At some point, somebody's going to breach that wall. And so it's on us, it's incumbent upon us to continue to evolve our tactics, to continue to employ the best practices, to continue to try to continue to fortify our facility, and that is what we're doing at all times. Now, granted, this incident happened on Friday. It's not something we ever want to let happen again. We absolutely can't let our guard down.
And so is there a policy in place where the inmates were getting searched when they were going out to the yard and then also coming back in? Is there a policy like that?
No, to my knowledge, there's not a standing policy to where everybody is searched coming in and out. It's certainly something that can be done, and it's certainly something that we'd explore.
And just talk to me about the way that the inmates are housed, because I know that you mentioned in your press conference on Friday that there's high and medium risk inmates that are sort of housed together, and then sometimes medium and low risk inmates are housed together. These three particular inmates, how are they housed? Is it sort of a general population type facility where they're out with
No,
each other all the time?
there are certain risk levels that we have. These were medium-high inmates. Now they're all in lockdown areas. They're completely locked down in an individual cell, those inmates in particular. But yes, with medium, there's certain groupings, certain categories of inmates that can be housed together. These were all medium-high inmates.
So prior to this incident, they were in cells with other people? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they were in cells with other inmates that were of like grouping. Mm-hmm. So they were in other cells. Now, one of the things that we did do was, and we will start doing that moving forward as well, is moving inmates that are of that type of classification higher up in the facility to where it's not so easy for them to get out if that does present itself at some point.
And so were there like 2 inmates to a cell, and then they would have time all together with like general population where they would able to...
It's possible. At some point, some of these folks can congregate. They can be in rec yards together. Sometimes they can be cellmates. With these 3 inmates in particular, they are now in single-man cells.
Okay. And talk to me about the notification process, because that's something that we've been getting some feedback from our viewers. We put together a little timeline, and we saw, I know, you were telling us that the escape happened around 10:40. It lasted about 40 minutes, which means that the inmates were apprehended around 11:20.
Right.
And the first notification through Twitter and Facebook from BCSO to just the public notifying them that inmates had escaped was at 11:31. I don't know exactly how long. Is there a standard procedure in place when these things happen?
Well, one of the things that we have to do before we notify the public, we need to do a head count. And when your facility's housing about 4,200, 4,300 inmates, it does present some challenges as far as getting an accurate head count. Then we have to go back and figure out who these people are to figure out what kind of a level of threat that they present to the public. Now, while an escaped inmate of any level could be considered dangerous, we want to find out exactly who's missing and how many are missing at any given time before we start sounding alarms. And so that was one of the things we needed to do, was positively identify these folks before we were able to formulate that plan.
So you were in no way trying to cover this up and hoping that you'd be able to catch the inmates before anybody...
No, that's not something we can do. We cannot afford to take chances with public safety. We're a public safety organization. That's what we do first and foremost. But we do need to make sure that we're putting out information accurately in a timely fashion.
And what can you tell us about the officer who was placed on leave over the weekend? What information, how were they involved in this?
He was the deputy that was in the unit at the time. Now, he's been placed on temporary administrative leave. It's a 10-day cooling off period where we can conduct our investigation, and this deputy's involvement is what we're looking into. Now, at this point, I couldn't tell you we have direct information to implicate this deputy into anything, but we're certainly not going to rule anything out. This 10-day period is what allows us to do that.
So this is more of a preemptive thing rather than a disciplinary measure?
Absolutely. Right now it's just an administrative process. He's out temporarily. Most likely will be brought back either before or at the end of those 10 days. And we'll continue to investigate, but at least we'll have a more clear picture and this deputy while he's out on his administrative leave.
And I guess one of the big questions that everyone's asking is, they saw a Facebook picture, I don't know, there was some people outside who were able to get a picture of the bedding through the window. So a lot of people just can't believe that at 10:40 in the morning in broad daylight, when this is a pretty high traffic area, that 3 people could simply just slip out the front of the building and get into a car and get away that easily.
Well, we're looking at video of the incident that was captured of the incident. It happened surprisingly quickly. I can tell you it wasn't like that sheet was hanging out for an hour or even 2 minutes. This was very well planned out, very well executed, and as I mentioned, they had help from outside. Now we are tracking down who some of those suspects are from the outside, but yes, it happened very quickly.
And what about surveillance around the facility? Do you have enough people patrolling around that should have noticed these things?
Well, we've got perimeter deputies. We've since stepped up our number of perimeter deputies. We've got a dramatic presence out there. And I'll be honest, one of the things that we're looking into is the possibility of further restricting the street in front of the jail. This is an open campus for now. That presents its own challenges. As the head of an agency, that presents some challenges. I know there were some plans to, at least in the future, maybe in the next year or two, to close this campus and fence it off. I'd like to see that stepped up. And today we'll be meeting with folks from the county to see if that's something that we can do to close off these streets and restrict that access. It's not the most ideal situation for us, for our deputies, for our inmates, to have a facility where somebody could just drive up at any given time.
And just to clarify, there isn't any sort of watchtower like you might see in a state facility here?
No, there's not a watchtower where you see in prison movies, things like that. We don't have anything like that. Now, I wouldn't rule out creating a vantage point where we could do that as part of our overall plan for security, but it's something that we're working toward.
And then one more question, when they were out in the recreational area, people are wondering, well, there should have been obviously some eyes on them as well, given the fact that they are such a higher security risk. What went wrong there? Is it perhaps an officer to inmate ratio problem that needs to be addressed?
Well, we've always had an issue with staffing. Right now we're at what I would consider to be pretty close to maximum staffing. And at this point, that deputy was in that unit by himself. Now, while that's within standards as far as inmate to officer ratio, I would have rather had a secondary officer in there. That's not something that by our current staffing levels we're allowed to have, but it's something that I'm certainly pursuing with county officials.
And approximately how many inmates were out in that rec area with that one deputy?
I believe those 3 were in that area by themselves at that time.
So it was 3 of them and 1 officer?
No, the officer was in another part of the unit.
Okay. So there were others. So how many inmates was he responsible for at that time?
Well, we've got a 1 to 48 ratio. So that one deputy is responsible for 48 inmates. Now, the vast majority of them were in their cells at this time. These 3 were in the unit. But that deputy's watching different things at that time. For example, if the commissary cart comes to hand out commissary, then that deputy's responsible for monitoring what's going on there, monitoring the screen where all the doors are, and then, of course, the rec yard. So they got a lot going on. And certainly I'm a fan of getting more deputies in there if we can.
And anything else that you learned from this whole, or you're thinking about changing as a result of this whole incident?
Well, we're certainly looking to beef up our security as far as everything goes here. I'd like to get more people. I'd like to get more technology available. I'd like to be able to shut down access more. Now, those are all things that are in the works. I just don't know what budget's going to allow us for.
And last thing you might want to just say to the people, I know you just wanted to emphasize, obviously, that public safety, this is your top priority, so I didn't know if you just wanted to say that in a soundbite. Final comments?
No, of course the safety of the public is paramount to everything that we do. And certainly this is something we're going to work to prevent. And as I mentioned, we're looking at several different methods of doing that. Some of it's going to be technology driven, some of it's going to be restricting access, and some of it's going to be just good old-fashioned police work.
Great, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.